Let the nightmares begin.
This happened to me in January 2014, on a back road in northeast Arkansas. At the time, I was a newspaper delivery driver. I picked up my papers from the press usually around 12:15, and it was a 45-minute drive to get to the start of my route. At the time, I was a cigarette smoker, so after I bagged up enough newspapers to sustain my route for a while, I'd light up a cigarette and roll the window down. Being cold, I tried to keep it up as much as possible because my car back then didn't have AC. There's a really long stretch of gravel road called Old Military Road. On the left side of the road are mostly houses, and on the right is fence posts and open pasture with barns and troughs for horses and cows. It is in the middle of bumfuck nowhere though. There are no street lights. Some people have floodlights in their yard. So I'm driving along with my windows down, smoking a cigarette. It's about 2:20, 2:30 a.m. and begin smelling a combination of burning hair and bad period UTI. It's not a mixture of the two, but one and also the other. It isn't a great smell. I toss the cigarette and roll my window up, but I can still smell whatever that awful smell is. The further I go down the road, the worse the smell gets. I usually see some of the cows sleeping outside or horses chilling sometimes, but nothing tonight. So I know that I'm not the only one that picked up on something being weird that night. As I'm coming up to a fork in the road, I have to take the left. There is a big open field to the far right. I see what looks like a man with a deer's head. It was too dark for me to tell whether it was a man wearing a deer skull or an actual human deer cross. But it was definitely the source of whatever the smell was. It scared the fuck out of me, and I didn't want to hang out long enough to figure out exactly what it was. To my perception, he was at shoulder height, 7 feet tall. The head probably added a foot. I don't know, but he was massive. They were definitely deer antlers, and the smell was disgusting. I saw him stretch his arms. Imagine flexing your arms and chest by making a wide C with your arms. His movement for the 2-3 seconds I saw him looked to be human. I found a new job by late January and started by February. I was not interested in ever being out in that area again. Other weird shit happened in the year that I did that job, but that was definitely the weirdest. Creepy deer man, let's not meet. In college, I lived up on top of a mountain road, but still only 5 minutes to town down a trail through the woods. There was a 100-plus-year-old oak in the yard, and a slab stone porch built by hand. I lived in the studio apartment that was outside of the main house. Main house was haunted, but my shack was cozy. The woods up there were weird too. I never really was in the main house at all, but the 3 who lived there said some nights you couldn't sleep for all the noise. Floorboards creaking, thumps and knocks, etc. My experiences happened outside. I hunted small game up there, as there must have been a rabbit colony in the vicinity. plus a few squirrel drays. Often out there, while I was stalking, I'd get the distinct feeling of being stalked myself. Keep in mind, this stand of forest is only several acres, but was preserved mainly because of the historic oak trees scattered around. It's old woods. I would hear laughter like children's laughter, but not quite like in a creepy movie. It was a bit distorted and almost like flirty giggles you might imagine a fairy would make. It would come from a different direction each time I sought it. I eventually decided to stop following it and hunt. It never did stop. I would sometimes spend an afternoon in town having drinks or hanging out at my friend's place. I'd finally leave and have enough liquid courage to hike back up the trail in the dark. That laughter would be replaced by noise. Just like things running all around you and dashing about the trees. I've been an outdoorsman for a long time, and I know the woods are noisy at night, particularly in the southern Appalachians, but this was different. It was dead silent out there in that stand at night, except for this rushing to and fro by some unseen feet. Not like game fleeing though. Deer run away and crash about doing it. These steps were like something or some things running swiftly around me. It's like it would cross the trail up ahead, then behind me, then alongside, but I could never see anything. I was a big-time night owl back then, and was regularly up doing schoolwork into 3 or 4 a.m. One such night, it had just snowed a fresh 20 inches or so. Our yard and the woods were like a paradise for me and my dog. I was excited to hunt around the next day for tracks and see if I couldn't locate the rabbit den precisely. I was up working and the dog came scratching to get in. Not frantic or anything. I let her in and she lay down to sleep. Odd, because she's a husky and preferred the snow to my tiny heated apartment every time. I decided to call it a night too and went out for a cigarette. It was 3:24 a.m. I can still see it on top of my MacBook display before I closed it. I went out and noted the clouds were dispersed a bit and the moon was bright on the snow. I lit my cigarette and was just looking out across the fence and into the woods when something caught my eye. It looked just like a silhouette of somebody leaning against one of those big oak trees. Like you'd see somebody with a palm planted against the wall, with the arm straight out leaning against it. It's not moving, so I can't tell if I'm just tired, or the lighting is funny, or what. So I walked further to the end of the porch, and as soon as I stepped on the fresh snow there, it took off. The thing was tall. My estimates based on the tree put the thing at 7 foot. It ran along the border of the fence and back off into the woods. It was hairless as far as I can tell, and completely naked. Otherwise though, its form was just that of a skinny, tall man. I went inside and switched to boots, grabbed my rifle and my flashlight, and I went to check the tracks. I picked up a set of what had to be a size 14 or 15 bare feet tracks. It ran along the fence and down the treeless stretch of backyard, as if heading into the woods. But then the tracks just ended about 20 feet short of the wood line. I don't know if it jumped to the tree line. Probably could have, but there weren't any more tracks that I could find. That night, or the next day. It was like it just vanished. Never could explain that one. So, my friend Rob went to East Taunton Massachusetts last winter to visit his grandparents. He said that on the third night he was there, he was in the backyard of his grandparents' house playing with his little sister in the newly fallen snow. He said that it was dark out and they were going to go inside, but he saw what he thought was a man standing at the edge of the backyard. He said that even from the distance he was at, he could just tell something was wrong. He sent his sister inside to get their dad while he approached the man. He said that the man was bent over like he was trying to catch his breath. He also said that even while bent over, the man was freakishly tall, maybe 6 feet or so bent over. He was about halfway to the man when his dad came out with a flashlight. His dad walked up to Rob's side, and as he turned on the flashlight, he called, "Hey, sir, are you okay?" At the sound of talking, the man straightened up completely, adding another 3 feet or so to his. With the light pointed on him, Rob and his dad could see what the man looked like. At this point, the description of the man is when Rob's voice starts shaking. He said that the man was naked. His arms and legs were very, very long for his body, which in itself was very long. Rob said that his skin, what skin there was blue and purple, like he had been outside for a very long time, and that it was stretched tight against his body. He said the man looked to be decaying, chunks of his flesh missing here and there. Rob described the man as looking like a very tall zombie. The man had no hair to speak of, not on his head or chest or around his genitals. Rob and his dad both ran inside, and his dad called the police. But when they got there, the man was gone. When I was in my first year of college, I lived with my mum by ourselves. My dad had passed the year before, and we moved out of the house shortly after. I was glad because I had suffered a lot of paranormal trauma growing up there and was glad to get out. One night I was driving home on Highway 111 North after youth group, and I saw something that still bewilders me. It was lightly raining that night. Mist crawled across the road from the cow fields on either side. The lights from the few gas stations nearby were reflected in the wet asphalt. I was driving about 3 car lengths behind a dark minivan with nobody else in sight on the roads. All of a sudden, I saw the van swerve to miss something in the middle of the road. I was going too fast, and the road was too slick to miss it. All of a sudden, I saw framed in my headlights and silhouetted in the glowing red brake lights of the van speeding away, a tall muscular man with the upper shoulders and head of a buck. It was like a minotaur, but a deer head instead of a bull, and glowing red eyes. I clinched and braced for impact, and then passed right through the figure. It was like it dissolved right into the mist. I am used to swerving to miss deer at night, but I should have nailed this thing on the driver's side. Nothing. I was too afraid to look in the rearview mirror as I gassed it and sped home. I was only a couple of miles away, which was both comforting and terrifying at the same time. I raced in the door and locked it behind me. I told my mum, who laughed it off, but was disconcerted at my pale, clammy complexion. I only later found in research a being described like what I saw, the wendigo, a Native American legend that was terrifying to me as a child, but I had never heard it described like this. I had never heard of any creature like this until that night on a dark highway 111 that I will never forget. So this happened when I was 6 years old. Our family was taking a trip up to the mountains, specifically a cabin owned by my aunt and uncle's family. Near this cabin was a discontinued railroad project, which even tunneled through a mountain. When this happened, it was near the end of the winter months. Alright, now on to the actual story. The entire day had felt off to me. We went on a hike, and I couldn't hear any birds or animals. And when we were turning around, I started getting excited because I smelled something coppery, and I thought it might be copper. The only thing that deterred me is that I felt like if I went to find it, I probably wouldn't come back. I don't think it was blood or anything related, but I felt it wasn't safe to chase the smell. This hike was to the eastern entrance of the discontinued railroad tunnel, then back to the cabin. My parents wouldn't let me go in the tunnel whatsoever. As in, the second I stepped within 10 feet, they were getting uneasy and telling me to back away from where the rocks might fall. But they weren't looking at me, they were staring at a pile of rocks taller than the others, illuminated by the light from the other side. The walk back was tense and quiet. I was the only one trying to initiate conversation. As we were just leaving the edge is where I smelled the copper. As we walked back, my dad kept glancing behind us at random intervals. It was only that night that I actually noticed anything while I was there. There was one bedroom, perfect for a family of 4, but it had one window. I never trusted that window, and I was right not to. That night, my parents were up much longer than usual, but stayed silent. After they fell asleep, I was pondering on their weird behavior. And at what I would guess was close to 2 a.m., I felt something. The room cooled down, and I felt horribly cold for a moment. I felt pure dread. And along with the chill, I could almost feel what seemed like hunger of some sort, burning my face at an angle from the window. Whatever it was, I knew I was awake, and it knew that I could tell it was there. Then I felt it, that same feeling of, if I don't do this, I won't get a chance to correct that mistake. So I got up as high as I could, and jumped off the top bunk where I was supposed to sleep. Then I turned on a lamp and pointed it at the window, while it was in my hands. Whatever it was, we had a mutual feeling of, no, I don't like this one. It was pale in the light, and my fear probably made me the same color. All that I could see in the window was a nearly white head with pits for eyes, no lips, slightly larger and sharper than normal blood-stained teeth, as well as its thin yet broad shoulders and a single blood-red hand with abnormally long fingers that ended in needle-like points, which was hovering, poised to shatter the window. A few seconds after the light hit it, it opened its mouth and let out a muffled scream, blocked slightly by the window, and then vanished to the night. The scream woke everyone up, and I was still standing in the dark, pointing a lamp at the window, looking horrified. My parents finally got me to sleep. I really don't know how they managed that. But the next day, while we were heading out, I looked at that window from outside and realized something even more horrifying. This thing had to be at least 8 feet tall, just to have been able to look at the bottom of the window, because there was a ditch around the edge of the cabin. We took one last hike around 9 a.m. When we looked back in the tunnel, the rocks in the tallest pile had shifted, and there was now a deer antler sitting near the top of the shifted pile. And there were now pools of a shiny liquid in the cave. The scent of copper was prominent in the area, and now even the fish in the nearby stream wouldn't surface for air or insects. Thank you very much for watching. That was 5 true possible Wendigo encounters. I hope you enjoyed them. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and sharing with someone who also might like it. It would really help my channel grow. If you have any stories that you'd like to share on this channel, please send them to scarepapa@gmail.com. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and stay safe.